In this video, I'm talking about autism in movies and 4 of the best ones I've seen that I think you should definitely see. All that's coming up. Hey guys, welcome back to the Aspie world. My name is Dan. I have autism, ADHD, OCD, and dyslexia, and I make weekly videos on all this type of content. So if you're new around here and you'd like to learn more about that subject, please hit that subscribe button to see weekly videos from me. And also, if you're watching over on Facebook, be sure to give this page a like and a follow to see more videos just like this one. Okay guys, it's good to be back. I'm not wearing a hat. I haven't worn a hat in the last couple of videos because I just don't know, I just fancy not wearing a hat for these couple of videos. I don't know, I'm just trying something out. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm normally wearing a hat. Sorry if you're new around here. And I normally wear a hat, so I'm just talking nonsense, aren't I? So, autism in movies. Before we get on with that, let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know what country you're watching from or what city you're watching from. Pop me a comment down below and I read and respond to every single one, so it's never wasted. Okay guys, so autism in movies. There is quite a bit of autism representation on TV and film these days. Not as much as it needs to be, not as much as I'd like to see, but it's getting there, it's getting good. So what I would say is that I kind of pulled out a list of 4 of the films that I have seen / I'm about to see. One of them is in the middle there because I haven't actually seen the full video yet. And I think this represents autism really fun, well, and balanced. I think having these movies gives you a well-balanced view of autism. Now, autism in movies is always a difficult one. And the reason being is because you have, there's a multitude of variables that can make this difficult. One of the main ones is trying to make sure that you represent the condition in a fair and equal light, that you don't offend anybody who has that condition. Also, you don't want to try and upset anybody who has the condition, who would think that, you know, they're not getting it right or they're misrepresenting it or whatever. And then there's the other issue where you may have actors acting autistic, but they're not played by autistic people, and then it brings up this whole, discussion where you think, you know, is it okay for neurotypical people to play autistic people because autistic people play neurotypical people? So it's a really difficult one. So you have like one camp of people saying that everybody who is autistic in movies needs to be played by autistic actors, but then at the same time you think, well, you know, that means that autistic people shouldn't really play neurotypical actors, because how do you make that fair and balanced? But it's a big question. But that's probably why there isn't an awful lot of autism in movies and theatre in Hollywood. But regardless, we have a bunch, and those are pretty good for now. So I'm going to start off with the classic. So these are 4 of the ones that I think best represent it, and so these ones I think you should definitely watch. One of these is absolutely excellent, and I definitely think you should watch it. Number 1 is Rain Man. Oh, okay, I know everyone's thinking this at home. Oh, Dan, you know, you're talking about Rain Man, and everybody talks about Rain Man. Yes, they do talk about Rain Man. But what Rain Man did is it broke the silence and the stigma between knowing about autism and actually broadcasting that to the entire world. So everyone was like, huh, and everyone started talking about it. Now, Rain Man is a super old movie. It was made way back in the 80s, and even, you know, it involves some really interesting insight. Now, it's based on a guy called Kim Peek, I think his name was, and he had a nickname called the Human Google because he could read like a book, both pages of the book exact same time, because he could just scan with one eye one page and one eye the other page and then read. So he'd read a lot of books very often. Now, Dustin Hoffman plays the character of the autistic gentleman, which in fact isn't just like typical autism if we think about autism on the spectrum, he is called a savant, and he has savant syndrome. Now, savant syndrome is like the more high support needs of an autistic person. Now, that's not typically what people would have seen when they've come across autism, because you might get people who are more verbal, because in the film, obviously, he's non-verbal and he can only talk short sentences and can't do anything independently. But some autistic people can do stuff independently and can talk. So it was an interesting one because they broke the silence on that, because nobody was really talking about autism, but it brought it to public light. It brought it out to the public. And, you know, even in one part, Tom Cruise, who plays his brother in it, says like, you know, where's all this autism nonsense? And it's really interesting because it got people talking about it, and I think that made it just fantastic. But what it did do is it opened the mind of what the potential of autistic people can do. And in it, Dustin Hoffman, who's playing this character, doesn't seem to engage with the world at all, but then he's really good at counting cards, and he can see, you know, patterns and things, and then he helps him kind of like, you know, win games in a gambling casino and stuff like that. But then in the end, Tom Cruise doesn't really want to take care of his brother, but he has to because it's his next of kin. But Tom doesn't understand autism, and he's kind of reluctant, and he's kind of like a bit, you know, I don't know, out of touch with his brother really, because he can't relate to him. But then he kind of like, you know, really does love him in the end, and then they actually put him into a hospital and stuff like that, and then Tom Cruise is really upset. But it's a good film to watch because I think like it gives a fair reality of what some people may go through when they're dealing with the fact that someone on the autism spectrum can't relate to them, and then they may feel kind of, you know, detached from that person, which is a really good thing to watch, because it gives you like an all-rounded view of how people may act. You know, it's negative as well. Some people can act negatively around it. But just to clarify, Rain Man isn't the nickname of the autistic character. Rain Man comes from the fact that Tom Cruise is his brother. Obviously they grew up in the same house, but when his brother, who is the autistic savant, was taken away to a special hospital to live, basically because he had such high support needs, he said it was raining the day that he left, and so I think it was like when Tom Cruise left, or when he left, I can't remember which way around it goes, he says bye bye Rain Man because it was raining, and then that's it. So he does explain that, but that's where the film title comes from. But I highly recommend watching it if you haven't already watched it, because it's a really good film. Okay guys, on to the second movie. Okay, this movie is called The Accountant. Now this film is really interesting. I haven't seen this film all the way through yet because I'm finding it hard to find an actual version of it on like DVD, because basically I like to buy things or I like to stream them, and I have a bunch of streaming services, but it's not on any of my streaming services, so I think I'll have to buy the DVD. So there is a gentleman called Ben Affleck, who's an actor in Hollywood obviously, and he plays this autistic accountant and a guy who sees patterns and things. But kind of as the movie's really interesting because it shows how fascinating the brain of an autistic person is, but it also highlights the social difficulties he has and relating to other people really well. And I think by having him an independent guy, a strong, good job, you know, he's capable of having relationships with women, but he is also on the spectrum, and those socially awkward moments and those disconnections from reality shows that he is on the spectrum. It's just a great way to put it across, and I think they did a really good job in this movie. Okay, so as much of it as I've seen, he kind of goes from being this accountant to being this kind of like spy type kind of dude with a gun who, like, it's all a bit crazy. It gets a bit crazy, which is typical of like Hollywood, you know, they want to make it like, you know, crazy guns and explosions and stuff. But in terms of actually showing autism, it's definitely an interesting one. It came out in 2016, and like I said, Ben Affleck plays the autistic gentleman in it, and it's an all-round interesting film to watch, and I've had it recommended to me a lot by you guys and some of my friends, so definitely check that one out. But I think that what I've seen of the autism represented in it is really good. It's really interesting, and I think it really gives an insight, and again, it's breaking that silence and stigma of autism in Hollywood. Okay, so number 3 is a movie that I actually came across because somebody recommended this to me. It came out in 2009, I believe. Now this movie is called Adam, and it's classed as a romantic drama, but in it there's a guy called Adam who is he's a autistic guy living with his dad, if I remember correctly, and they live in a place in New York, and Adam is on the spectrum. He has a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, and his dad dies, but he, you know, carries on living in that same house, and you know, it's basically a story of his life, and then he meets a girl, and then they start dating, and then they break up eventually. But the interesting thing about Adam is that it's really focused around just him and his condition and how it interacts with the world, but in a really good way. It makes it like a good film that you could watch. You could like watch this movie with your girlfriend. You could like watch this movie with your friends. You could go to the cinema to see this movie. It's very well done. Now the actor Hugh Dancy plays the main character Adam, and there's another girl called Rose Byron in it. I think that's her name. Anyway, it's a very good film. I highly recommend checking it out because it's one of the most interesting and compelling ones, where it shows his fridge is full of like the same foods, or his freezer is full of the same foods, and he has that same food every day. And he's an electrician, so he works in an electrical company fixing stuff, and he really loves electronics, and that's his thing, you know, and he has a gift to do electronics. And so it's really interesting. He actually gets a really good job at the end of it, but but he loses his relationship with a girl, but they remain friends. But it's really good. It's a good way of showing a fair balance. Like, you know, you come from Rain Man in that film where, you know, he's a savant who can't really talk that well. But then you get Adam, this film in Adam, he can talk really well. He holds down a job. He lives independently. Yes, he's got his troubles and his issues, and those are highlighted. And I think it's very, very fair. And this is probably the best film I've ever seen autism represented. It is absolutely fantastic. Okay, so the next movie I'm going to talk about is the Power Rangers movie. Now, this one came out in 2017. Now, in it, RJ Seiler, I think, plays a guy called Billy Craston, which is obviously the Blue Ranger, and everybody knows Power Rangers. We all know Billy, and I absolutely love Power Rangers. Power Rangers is one of those shows I grew up watching when I was a kid. I watched like the first ever episode, and I got just obsessed with Power Rangers, and I bought all of the toys, and I got helmets and stuff, and I just loved it, right? So Billy in that movie, he's one of the Power Rangers, you know, he's part of this like gang of superhero dudes that kind of, you know, he's just in school, but he's a bit awkward in school, and then he ends up being friends with these kind of people who are a bit wayward and a bit kind of like rough around the edges, but they all end up hanging out and being friends, and then they're hanging out, and then they find this alien spaceship and they become the Power Rangers. But the interesting thing about it is Billy is kind of a classic nerd type of guy. He's really into electronics, he's really into comic books and all that kind of stuff. He's very quiet and quite a meek guy. But in it, there's a scene where he's moving they're moving something like a rock or something, and then Billy kind of gets overwhelmed, and they say, "You okay, Billy?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's just I'm on the spectrum." And they say, "What?" He's like, "I'm on the spectrum." So he talks about the fact he's on the autism spectrum, and some of his, you know, his quirks and stuff in there become apparent because that's his character, and he's becoming that character, he's playing that character, and it's really, really good, and it shows him in a really good light. And it shows something interesting, that, you know, just because you're autistic doesn't mean you can't have friends, doesn't mean you can't fit in, doesn't mean you can't be a superhero. I mean, this stuff really shows the goals, and I think it was really, really good. And actually Power Rangers really, I watched that movie twice because I was so taken by the fact that the character was autistic, and I really related to that. I loved it. I think they did a fantastic job. I think it was nice putting in, you know, a nice young, good-looking, you know, African-American autistic guy. I think it was just great. I think it was a great example of what can be done when Hollywood actually puts people who represent real people in movies. I think it was great, you know, and yeah, it was a good shout. And I think that the Power Rangers movie, I'm gonna buy it because it was so good, and I probably might buy a toy of Billy as well to put on my shelf because I like collecting toys, and I think it'd be cool if I just had, like, you know, the autistic Power Ranger toy. That'd be cool. Guys, if you have anything to add to this list of movies that represent autism awesomely, put it in a comment down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace.